Just a friendly reminder to everyone to please keep your video on in some way, shape, or form so that the public can see that you're there. Thank you. Okay, Gloria and Savian, all set.
All right, great. Thanks, Barb.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Thank you all for being here with us this evening. It's nice to see all your faces. And I'm just scrolling through. Looks like we have a great number of people who are here tonight. I first want to start off with a moment of silence. We lost a student this past week, Kyla Robinson, who is Tony Robinson's sister. She was one of our La Follette high school students. So I just want to start off our meeting. She was killed in a car crash, and start off with a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you. I know that our La Follette community is helping in support of Kyla's family. Thank you, Principal Devin LaRosa, for all your work. And Mike Hernandez for all your work in helping support the family. I want to, is Judge Mitchell on yet? I don't see him.
I do not see him yet.
Okay, I just want to throw a shout out to him for now being selected as presiding judge for our juvenile court. I know that he will really help support our children and treat them with compassion and fairness throughout the juvenile justice process. So congratulations to Judge Mitchell. If you see him, when he comes in, we can go ahead and just start clapping and give him a shout out. I want to just also take a moment to acknowledge our students who are here today. Some of them have not attended, and we really have tried to get the student voice into this process. So for your students who are joining us, if you could just pipe in. I think I see Nadia. If you could just tell us what school.
Memorial High School.
What grade are you in?
10th grade.
Great, thank you for being here and joining us. And then we have Inichi.
Nichi.
Hi, Nichi. Can you tell us what school and what grade?
I'm in 12th grade. I go to La Follette High School.
Great, thank you. Any other students?
I think those are the ones I've seen so far, Gloria.
All right. Okay, I do have to leave at 7 o'clock for another event that I have to be at. If we are still meeting at 7, Savian will take over the meeting. So let's go ahead and get started with the agenda. It does say approval of minutes. The minutes are in board docs right now, but they were just submitted in board docs this afternoon. So if we won't go ahead and approve them tonight, but if you can review them and we will approve them at our next meeting. And so if we can, who is going to share the screen, the presentation screen for this evening?
I can do that, Gloria.
Okay, that'd be great.
Did you want to review the charge, Gloria?
Yep, I'll do that when we review it. It's part of the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and here's the agenda for tonight. We're about to review the charge statement and purpose of our team. We are going to go through some of the responses to questions from the last meeting. We won't go them through detail, but Mark Brown will take us through that. And this is where we'll spend a lot of our time in this evening, is defining what it means to be safe in MMSD schools, and also policies 4224, 4147, and 4400. And then we'll end our meeting by confirming next meeting dates, times, and proposed agenda items. Are there any questions, comments about our agenda tonight? All right, next screen. Okay, just a reminder to review our charge. The committee is charged with examining safety and security options for our high schools related to the removal of SROs out of our Madison Metropolitan School District high schools. The work of the committee will focus on budget and policy recommendations to the board, consider information regarding the 2016 Ad Hoc Committee, consider safety and security high school systems that would remain the same, revised, strengthened, and or changed, what needs to be in place when schools reopen, consider resources needed to support safe schools, reallocation of resources, etc., and review and make recommendations regarding current Board of Education policies regarding safety and security and police involvement. Policies number 4224, 4147, and 4400. Expand 4400 to include more details of required police involvement and continued relationship with MPD for Act 81 and 143 in response to mandated reporting requirements. All right, next slide. So this is really just the foundation of how our security team within the school district operates, really with the foundation of keeping our students at the center, students, staff, and teachers at the center, preparedness, response, recovery, and prevention mitigation. And we did go through some of that earlier on. I believe it was our first meeting. Next slide. So far what we've heard from our conversations and discussions is really the racial violence. We discussed racial violence, the impact of racial violence in our community, that we needed a student-centered commitment in this process, a need for collective vision, identifying short-term and long-term goals, and the need for student voice again, really thinking outside the box, being innovative, grassroots strategies around school safety, and then also a clarity of restorative justice implementation, how it's working, assess it, what needs to be improved, what are the gaps, and transparency and understanding of data collection and sharing, and the need for trusting collaborative relationships and alignment. Have I missed anything from what we've talked about so far? Okay, next slide. I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Mark Brown.
Thanks, Gloria. Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. And all this rain and cold weather. Summer's gone, unfortunately. So basically, I'm going to address the questions that were submitted. What we've decided to do is take a Q&A documenting format where everybody's sending their questions to me, and then the safety and security team will sit down and answer the questions and disseminate them back out to the group. What I really want to point out is that they're really good questions, but I'm asking that you continue to send them to me, and this document is actually going to be a living document of sorts. So the questions as we get them, we will continue to add them to this document and answer them and send them back out to the group. And I guess I'm kind of curious, did anybody not receive the answers to the questions? So it's a living document. We'll continue to add questions to the document and then answer them and send them back out to the group. If you have any questions about the answers or want something elaborated on a little bit more, please just send me your responses and we'll make sure that we take care of them and answer them within each meeting. And then our next,
Mark, if I could just let you know, there were a couple that they told me they couldn't answer as of yet, that we were waiting on.
say again?
I was told that there was a couple of ones that I had submitted that they didn't have answers to yet, so I was
Okay.
waiting on a couple.
Okay. I'll note that, Martha. That was Martha, right?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So like I said, it's a living document. Continue to submit your questions and we'll answer them and put them back on that document and send them out to the group each week. And that's it.
Thanks, Mark. I think, it's these questions that come up in the meetings, I think it's really important for the team to take a look at the responses and also the questions. And if there's anything that we need to highlight, we'll be doing the same. If we're seeing the same question over and over again, and it is something that we need to follow up on, we will put it on the agenda. But if there's anything specifically that you feel that we need to expand and explore and place on the agenda, let us know. Nadia, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, can you share that again with me? Because I don't think I got it.
Barb,
I
can
will
you?
do that. I don't think you did, and I'll get them out to you.
Okay, thank you.
Nadia, are you getting our emails for the meetings? And
Yeah,
okay, great. Okay. We'll send that to you.
okay.
I'm just scrolling through to see if we have any. Hey, I see Judge Mitchell on there now. Congratulations, Judge. We just gave you a shout out at the beginning of our meeting.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Okay. So the next topic really addresses one of the major questions that came up at our last meeting. And that was from your perspective of your role, what are critical elements of school safety? So, we want to talk about today and get your perspective on what school safety means to you. What are the critical elements that we need to consider when we're talking about school safety? And so I'm just going to open it up. And I think, Barb, if you can bring up that whole screen so I can see everybody, that'd be great. Yeah, perfect. From your perspective, the critical elements of school safety. And we're having, we will be taking notes and documenting all the information we received today. Who wants to start us off?
Can I go?
Sure. Nietzsche, is it? Nietzsche?
Nietzsche, that's Inichi, Nietzsche. It's fine either way.
Okay.
When it comes to school safety, I feel like it's not for everybody and it's not as inclusive as it should be, and that a lot of people hold biases against certain groups of people without knowing. So what school safety means to me, that everyone is being included to be protected. The students, no matter like who they are or what their past is, that they are human beings and that they should be protected as they should and not judged upon arrival, I guess. Like people judge first and then act later.
Yep, that's critical. Thank you, Anichi, for that.
I can go. School safety means to protect all staff and students from danger and people that we don't know will come to school with armed or does not know the staff.
Great. Thank you, Nadia. Anybody else want to pipe in? What are the key elements to school safety? Thinking about, right, we've taken SROs out of our schools now. What are we going to, what are the key elements we will need to invest in? Strategies we would need to start to ensure that our school communities are safe?
I can pipe in, Gloria.
Martha, thank you.
From the special education point of view, as a highlight, I think if we're supporting kids in the classroom, especially when we have behavioral and just other needs that are getting missed or misinterpreted, it's doing a disservice to the whole classroom. And the kids are learning from the adults how to respond to different situations. And if sometimes there's reactions going on that have nothing to do with that time and place, but maybe coming from somewhere else. So I'm wondering how well we're supporting our individual needs by not making the general education teacher not only do her job of trying to support the classroom, but also keeping in mind all of the other needs that encompass the classroom to those specific individuals. Because I've been to a couple different IEPs and collaborated with a few parents, and I've also seen the general ed teacher get multiple duties, even though she's not like a cross-categorical teacher. So sometimes it's kind of out of their element. So I don't know how well all situations are being appropriately handled, and maybe could be identified differently if there was extra help in the room.
So, so you are, Martha, you're really focused on the individual needs of the students and the staff and providing more support within the classroom?
Yeah, so maybe like, because trying to identify situations before they get to a heightened place. If there's more awareness going on in the classroom, then we can be ahead of ourselves.
Great, thank you for that, Martha.
I can go. For me, school safety is really about the intentional relationship building and making sure that students feel emotionally safe when they're in our buildings. I think that in order to have a safe building, meaning like, you know, people aren't bringing weapons or fights aren't happening, students need to feel like they belong, and they need to feel like they're a part of a community that supports who they are as an individual, whether that's like, you know, their race, ethnicity, their gender, all of those things. And that's both outside of the classroom and inside of the classroom. So they need to feel like all staff, including like teachers, and when they're in a classroom, that they're supported and that they're listened to. I think that also that goes the same with adults, right? Like they need all of those same things that we talk about for our students. So for me, it's really about knowing, when I think about like, how am I ensuring that students are feeling safe in the buildings that I've been in? It's about knowing the kids, and it's about understanding the way, you know, their mannerism being different, if they're having a bad day, if they're struggling with something, and them having people to talk to and places that they can go to feel supported and heard and not met with judgment or like being condemned or anything like that. So for me, it's really about providing those spaces and making sure that our students know that there are adults in the building that care about who they are and understand who they are and aren't trying to make them change just their natural being. Like they can come in and be like met where they're at and be supported.
Thank you, Patrice. Oh, go ahead.
I'm gonna second you, Ms. Hutchins. And with that, just when situations arises within the school, just that notion of, because students pick up on things really quick, like if they're not being disciplined or they're not getting in trouble for things, then they just build off that. So when things happen, if we can, come up with the restorative plan to ensure that they know that you can't continue this behavior, because high school kids, they know if they can get away with things and they will continue to do it all the time. So the restorative justice part is huge for me when certain safety situation arises.
Great, thank you, Corban. So I like that you pointed out the restorative component, right? Really building some accountability to actions and behavior, while also teaching and learning. And then also with Patrice, your comment around providing that emotional safety and support systems in place. What does that look like? I mean, the elements of supporting a structure of places where and people that students can go to. Now we know that SROs play that role, and how do we replace that, right? I mean, SROs wasn't the only people in the building, but are there opportunities to build off those individuals or spaces for support?
Gloria, may I answer, please?
Yes, Coach, is that you?
Yes. Hello, everybody.
You on camera? I can't see you.
Can you hear me though?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I initially it's school safety. First of all, to get to that first part that I tried to weigh in on, school safety, it addresses and deals with emotional and physical safety that's not used as a political football, something that people utilize in order to make gains and people utilize to basically take care of what their agenda is, as opposed to the overall needs of the school, because it encompasses more than words and people coming up with really pretty phrases. School safety on the one hand can mean psychologically creating a pathway of acceptance and a latitude of engagement. On the other hand, school safety might mean grabbing somebody to walk in your building. And it has to be, the question should first and foremost gestate in the people who actually work in school safety, which is the outreach and engagement team. The school resource officers, a lot of people incorrectly state that they were the first people. They were actually the last people. They were the action-oriented final resource and people, but the first people, as I constantly state to people, were what we call the outreach and engagement team, formerly known as security, because the very first thing they see in the morning, as I've said time and time again, and everybody can attest to, and the last thing they see is a outreach and engagement. We were the first and last people, and basically the people that would have insight when anything was going to happen, the safety, the most trusted adults, people that they would come to, because in every level of school engagements, it's us. So it's so many levels that I don't think we're going to get to them correctly, because we want to play political football with it instead of just being really pragmatic and have honest talks. The bottom line is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Coach, one of your elements is really building off that is supporting and building the capacity within our safety, our outreach engagement security team. Is really building off of what Patrice was saying, is what are those spaces in which our students can go to when conflict arises in schools?
Well, they already know where to go, but it's not supported by the general school structure. Many times students come to outreach and engagement, and because it can't go through the structural setup of the school within itself, because sometimes our school is more interested in doing things right instead of the right thing. So our voices and what we know should be actually happening is many times invalidated because it doesn't fit the guidelines of what the school do. So because people seem to be more interested in dotting the I and crossing the T than actually meeting the needs of a safety building and a safety mental system for students.
So that's why it's important for us to discuss these, elements and ideas here in this space so that we can provide for recommendations to the entire board. So thank you, Coach. Anybody else?
Yes, I would like to say something.
Sure, go ahead, Anichi.
I agree with what all three of them are saying. And I feel like we need to learn how to figure out how to discipline kids, but also it's like you're not going to get to know each and every kid because a lot of schools are filled up with students. It's hard to talk to people because it's like they're not there, they don't have time. And when you try to express that you're going through something or that something is happening, and it's not that easy. Some kids feel like how they raised, it depends on how they raised in homes, and they might be going through something at home which causes them to lash out at school to be destructive, or we don't know what what their mindset is or how they feeling, or it's just like you can't fully understand a person because it's a lot of people that you have to understand. You're not going to learn and understand all of them, and instead of get to knowing them, it's just when the time comes when they need you, you should be there, and that's when you're supposed to deal with it. And it's just like, as a teacher, you're supposed to be prepared to handle all students. And I feel like, I don't know, as adults, we are looking for you to help us and guide us. And yes, we are in high school. Some of us are in high school, which they are almost adults, but they don't know how to be adults because they're in this childish mindset. And you cannot change that for some people. You have to teach them. It's something to be taught, it's not given all the time. And that's what we're saying. And it's a lot of people, like we did have security guards at our school, and they did help us the best way they could. Like the Black ones, they tried to understand us. But what about the non people of color that were security guards? Did they try to understand us, or did they automatically assume with their biasness? And I don't know for all schools, because not all schools are predominantly Black. Not some schools are not predominantly white. So it is just different for each and every type of, I guess, area.
Thank you for that, Anichi.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in real quick and just touch on a few things. Being in the role of PBS coach / dean in a high school setting, as I said last week, I think in the short term, there are obviously some logistical responsibilities that we have as a committee to talk about. In the event of emergency, how are we going to respond, right? That's like for real, a real thing we need to figure out. The thing that I'm more interested in from where I sit is, and we talked about the value of relationship, and that word, we've talked about that word a lot. And I think that's where, when we talk about what does it look like when a kid feels valued, when a kid has that emotional stability and has emotional safety, the relationship and the strength of the relationship between the student and the curriculum, they see themselves in that curriculum. They feel connected to that curriculum. They feel like that curriculum gives them the tools to dismantle the barriers that stand in front of them that they face every day, whether it's because of the color of their skin, the language that they speak, the way they identify from a gender perspective, or their sexuality. They feel like the curriculum, they have a relationship to that, right? It's relatable. There's relevance. Additionally, there's a relationship with adults. And again, I keep coming back to this. If we're going to create real safe environments, it's expensive, because we're going to have to invest in more resources in the way of reducing class sizes, so that the adults that are working with our kids, our classroom teachers, are able to actually build real relationships with kids and families. It's hard to do that. Again, it's hard to do that when you got 30 coming in, 5 sets of 30 every day that are sitting in front of you. It's hard to build those solid relationships with people. I couldn't do that as an adult. I don't have solid relationships with 150 people. That's not manageable. And then the relationship of the school itself to the community. and making sure there's a connection and a relationship to the values and the needs of our community. If we don't acknowledge the things that are going on in the trauma and the experiences that our Black, our brown, our non-conforming kids are experiencing in our community at large, our school isn't that relationship between what's happening in school and what they're experiencing, and us being able to give them the tools to be able to go out and deal with that, right? And find that resilience, find that joy, battle back against what they're facing. We're ignoring what they're facing, and we're expecting them to get an education that in a lot of sense is outdated and obsolete as it relates to the experiences that they are having in their communities, which is why a lot of kids aren't on board. And when those kids aren't on board, those are our young people that we lose. And when we lose them, we lose, because the disruption they're trying to disrupt the system because we won't disrupt it for them. Right. And that's what we experienced in our hallways. That's what we experienced with our students who aren't, it just doesn't resonate with them. And so again, if we won't disrupt the system, they're going to disrupt it for us. And that's not the situation we want to put them in. We should be the ones who are standing up and taking a stand and saying, this doesn't make sense for this child. And so that also goes back to, right, providing spaces within our comprehensive high school system, where if this isn't helping a child actualize who they want to be, what flexibility do we have to do something else for that student? Because we have a responsibility to give them something that is valuable to them. And if sitting in the algebra class and sitting in the history class doesn't resonate with them, a whitewashed US history class doesn't resonate with them, as a 9th grader or a 10th grader, we got to figure out what can we do to resonate. And we got to have some actual real options other than sitting them in my office and me talking to them and me trying to help them through things. And then there's the restorative piece, and we can't restore something that wasn't there. So again, it comes back to that relationship and the value of relationship. You can't restore something that wasn't ever there. So we talk about restorative justice and restorative justice practices, and the RJ folks in here can definitely tell you, if there is no sense of community, it's very difficult to restore anything. So that's also, as it boils down to that relationship, and on a lot of different levels, that through line. And how are we going to create a structure where relationship is truly at the center and not just something we talk about? Because we talk about the value of relationship, but our system is not set up for the adults or students to build positive relationships where they see themselves. And as Coach Assad is saying, and as the young lady, Mr. Nietzsche is saying, when these students connect with people in our buildings, they're connecting with people who look like them. And the majority of our staff are in the outreach and engagement unit. And that's who the kids connect with, right? And so how can we flip that on its head? How can we support our staff who are in those roles to grow professionally, right? How do we invest in the people of color who we already are touching in our buildings, who already are touching with our kids? And maybe if some of them have interest in becoming classroom teachers, what's the pathway to make that happen? And how much as a district are we willing to invest in that? So I'll be quiet now. I've taken up a lot of time.
Gloria, can I piggyback on that, please?
That's great, Marcus. Hold on, Coach. That's great, Marcus. Thank you so much for that. I think that all you've said is so true. I mean, I think the relationships is the foundation, right? And if we don't have that, for our students, we're going to lose them. So thank you for highlighting that. Coach, you have a follow-up?
Yes. This brother made an excellent point when he talked about the people that they connect with that are accurate and positive reflections of self. When those children, whoever they are, I want to make this clear that outreach and engagement, we don't look at a gender, we don't look at a sex, we don't look at a color, we don't look at any of that nonsense when we reach out to children. That's why it's called outreach and engagement. We take you as you are because we're parents, we're humans, and when children come to us, it's our divine mission to at least in the moment actualize, stabilize, and make you feel engaged. But the brother made a great point when he said this. They will go to people that they see as trusted adults, and they have built up a relationship 2, maybe 3 years and engendered a sense of acceptance. But what happens, and I keep saying this, and it will eliminate some of these unnecessary conversations and meetings that we like to have, the system invalidates and dismantles that, because the system is always acting like we have to hire everybody from the outside to do what the people who have stabilized and are warm demanders in the building, not demanders of our own validation, but we demand that the children understand their own greatness. This system will always look outside and ignore the talent in the building. You were gracious enough, you and Savion, you were gracious enough, Gloria, to allow me to be on this committee. But 5 weeks later, I had to ask you, and through your kindness and acceptance, you allowed me to be on this committee. But we have a committee put together to discuss school safety and what restorative justice actually is in the real world and with real world applications. And none of the Black men, for the most part, who actually worked security at La Follette, which is now called Outreach and Engagement, none of us were even invited to be on the committee. So we always start the structural system always starts flawed, and then acts as if they don't understand why they didn't get accurate answers, and why, once again, we'll be right back here next year, because the structure always denies the real voices in the room that give it a purity of action, give it direction, and give it a thought. And we always do this in this school system. The people who really have the most to offer are the last voices you want to hear. And this time, let's just get it right. Look at our 30-year evidence-based, the results of how many children over the last 30 years have dropped out of school. That tells us it has to be a new way we do this, but we want to go ahead and push. Yeah, everything we're doing is working, even though we don't, and we know it doesn't. Look at the fact that some of the behavior of people who are in our building now, if any of the Black or brown men in this building would have exhibited that behavior, not only would we probably be fired, but the children watching that type of behavior would have been expelled. So we have to be honest and brave when we talk about what we call restorative justice, what we call acceptance, and who's going to be in charge of what actually should be a school disciplinary process. Because I think somebody said this quite correctly: children crave routine and structure, whether we want to believe it or not. And sometimes we set children up for failure to meet our agendas. And when they act out in very dangerous ways, they get into the newspaper. A lot of people sitting around with these really performative types of methodologies aren't going to be ones that are in the schools themselves having to quell and calm down and outreach and engage. And I'll leave it right there.
Thank you, Coach. That's what I like about you. You're just really straight up and tell it like it is. So thank you.
Gloria?
Judge Mitchell, yep.
Yeah, I would just want to kind of add to what I see Brother Flowers was talking about. I think from my perspective, what I see in the court is a lot of young people who are not really engaged in high school for a number of reasons. And the primary reason is that the social emotional trauma isn't protected in the school district. I'm not always quite sure who they're intersecting with. I don't always think that their intersections were with SROs, but it's very clear from the way that they interpret their body safety that they don't feel socio emotional connection to a lot of people inside the building. So I would say at least one of the things that the court system is trying to be more consistent about doing is really sharing with those in the building the very detailed psychological and trauma related emotional struggles that a lot of the young people bring into the building, so that we're not just trying to recreate the wheel. I think a part of safety is identifying those trauma related conversations with the young people and being very intentional up front, rather than waiting for an explosion to happen and then you trying to figure out on the back end what you're supposed to do to them. When we pushed for the Office of Youth Engagement to really get started, it was primarily because there was just no relationship between the court system and Madison School District. It just didn't exist. And so we were basically dropping traumatized children from our system back into your system, and there was no bridge, but whether it was social worker or IEP people or staff, nobody knew, and we knew what was happening. So I think from our vantage point, from the courts, we would like to see more of a defined coordination that really addresses the underlying emotional trauma that a lot of the young people bring into the space, and then being able to make sure that schools are intentional about sending the messages that they want for, for the young people to really have. So if they want to, espouse certain values, whenever I'm in the buildings, I'm always concerned that, I call them the walking dead, because it just seems like kids are nowhere. And so I'll be in the buildings and people just walk around. I'll ask them where they're going. They just nowhere. So, when we think about holistic safety, as children elect not to be bodily in classrooms, then that means that they're inside hallways. And when they're inside of hallways, it creates even more of an opportunity for their bodies and their minds not to be safe. So, yeah, I think we are committed to trying our best to conveying that information to our partners, but we also need to make sure that the young people are being placed in environments that trauma is truly respected and seen, and not devalued or made worse by the micro acts of aggression that sometimes not so enlightened teachers or workers can make worse rather than better.
Great, thank you.
Can I say something?
Yep. Oh, you just put yourself, yep, go ahead.
Okay, so basically, I see what they're saying, but we have to also talk about inside the classroom too. None of the teachers look like minority kids, so it's always going to feel out of place. And there's a lot of generational trauma that is going on in the Black community as well. Half of their parents didn't go to school. I know a lot of family members that didn't go to school. With their children, they don't go to school. So it's like a repetition. They don't have the motivation outside of school, and they don't have it inside of school. Most white teachers pity Black children. They don't see them for who they are. They see them as like charity instead of trying to see them as a human being. Or it's like hard talking to a white teacher because you don't want them to feel scared of you or feel offended. That happened to me before. I was talking to a teacher and she felt fear, like she was intimidated, which I didn't want her to feel intimidated, but I was just speaking my truth.
Thank you, Anichi. I think that last point, I think all your points are just so spot on. I think that the hiring teachers who look like our diverse student body, the generational trauma of our students, and then also, how, the charity component, and that just brings to mind for me is how race plays a role in what's happening in our schools, and have we equipped our white teachers and staff, all of our teachers and staff, to support and build those relationships that Marcus was talking about, right? Is if there's already fear and the unknown of how to approach a Black student, if you're a white teacher or white staff member, how do you build those relationships? And this is generally speaking, right? This is not, I know many white students and white, staff and teachers who are do really well in this area and are able to build relationships, but that is a barrier. And it's, I've heard it before. And so just wanted to pose that to the group of, how does race play a role in this?
Yeah, I think a key part of that is interrogating why a Black person's truth may intimidate a white teacher or white staff member. Something really worth interrogating.
Great, that's so true.
Yeah, this is Bianca. Let me know if you can hear me.
Yep, Bianca, we can hear you.
Yeah, so I think a few things that I wanted to say. One, thinking about safety, it's really important to start with consent, right? Whenever I'm working with a young person, that's the first thing we talk about is consent, sexually around your body parts, but also just generally, right? Nobody has the right to harm you. And unfortunately, we're not taught that as a society. We're taught when an adult does something to us, then we deserve it, right? But teaching kids that all people have to respect their bodies, including the police, including other adults, including your parents, including any type of authority figure is really important. It's also important to really interrogate, like what Savion was talking about. It's not just that somebody is purple and somebody is green and they don't like each other. It's intentional, right? That Black students are seen as criminal. And I really struggle with, can you really train somebody to treat you like a human being? Can you really train somebody to see you as a child and not as a criminal, right? Because I've never been to the majority of the countries in the world, but there's nothing about me that would go there and say this person is criminal, this person deserves to be thrown around the room because they got in a fight and deserve to be in a cage. So I really think when we're talking about safety, it's important to talk about allowing children to always walk in their dignity, even when they make mistakes, right? So if two kids get in a fight, me throwing the girl to the floor and putting my knee in her back, which has happened several times at La Follette from what I understand, is not allowing them to walk in their dignity, and it doesn't restore anything, and it doesn't it only causes more chaos and more violence and more harm. It doesn't actually solve the problem. It doesn't get to the root of why the two kids were fighting in the first place. And yeah, I think we have to understand that the reason why white teachers or whoever don't see Black children as children who don't know how to relate to them, who don't know how to be culturally competent, culturally specific, or whatever you want to call it, is an intentional U.S. anti-Blackness that was created and sustained in so many ways. And I think dismantling it is going to require accountability in addition to whatever training is in place, right? Because the thing, if I want to harm somebody, the thing that stops me from harming them is that knowing that I'm going to be held accountable for doing that. And I think that will inevitably change the dynamic. If a teacher knows if I do something racist or if I harm a student or any school personnel, I don't want to just pick on teachers. If they know that there's going to be an accountability process, it will shift the power dynamic and will shift this idea that we have such a stronghold on wanting to control Black children, right? And not giving them any power to make decisions over themselves, over their body, over their lives, over their education, right? And I'm sure all of you have heard this Martin Luther King quote about being so obsessed with order, being so obsessed with the status quo and not actually caring about justice or caring about the lives of our young people. And I think that paradigm shift needs to happen yesterday, but we're still working on it, obviously.
Okay, thank you, Bianca. Chief Noble Ray.
Yeah, I was struck by Anisi's comment about the parent generational trauma, and the question is, how do we create safety in the schools? But as we all know, safety is beyond those walls. Now, I totally agree with what has been said in terms of some of the strategies that are needed inside the walls, inside the walls. But I'll just share this quick story. I'm a chief of police. I'm driving to work. I hear a call come over the radio, and the call comes over the radio, and it is asking one of the police officers to respond to a house for a 9-year-old that a parent is having difficulty getting a 9-year-old to go to school. Okay, so I decide to respond, and as a uniform, I'm going there, and what I got out of this was hopelessness, a parent frustrated, a parent not knowing what to do, a parent not knowing what to say, literally saying, when it was all said and done, this child is yours. You handle it. And so safety, security, having home support, having the support that transcends not only at home, but connects with like the security guard, the teacher, all of those folks, it really has to be holistic. But, I felt so bad for this parent because, If I touch him, and we all understand all of the dynamics there. I just think that there is a gap missing in terms of how do we support, our parents to be part of the team that's sitting here in front of us right now. That part of that safety team, part of that, because that's what parents want. And it's not, when we define a parent, I'm not just saying a mother or, just a mother or in the traditional sense. I'm talking about a sister that is trying to get a child to go, an aunt or a friend that was left there with that child. How do I get this to happen? What do we do with that? And because we can't do it just within the confines of our school building, the bricks and mortar. It has to be really starting at that level. And that was a very frustrating moment for me. So Nisi just really got my thoughts flowing on that one.
Can I say something real quick? Good evening, everybody. John Milton, Multicultural Service Coordinator at La Follette. I just want to say it's all about that relationship, like everybody's been talking about, but the relational trust. I've been at La Follette for 8 years, and 3 out of the 8 years, we have had some horrendous situations, some big fights. Patrice has been there. We've had kids being thrown everywhere, and we did have to come in and hold some students down. But it's ironic that those students that we held down, we did circle back and talk with them and built relationships with them, of which in 2 of the situations, they told me about a gun being in La Follette building. So we can build that relationship, and we are building that relational trust with them. And as far as I have not seen anybody with a knee on a child's back maliciously trying to do something to a student. But the issue that I have is right now, there is no trust between student and staff. And just to give you just a small example, we've been reaching out and doing virtual mentorships, and a lot of our staff, and I understand to some degree, when it comes out to giving their personal cell phone numbers, they want to do the Google phone, not give out their numbers. But if I'm a parent at home and my teacher, the person that I'm entrusting to build my son, daughter, or whatever for future educational responsibilities, if you are not willing to give me your personal cell phone number, why should I have value and why should I trust in you? Mm-hmm. So for me, it's about the trust, and what Marcus Flowers, Judge Mitchell, everybody talked about. We have not taken the time to build that trust with our parents. We have not taken that time to build the trust with students. And for those that would ever come to La Follette, there's been times when Molly and I, we have more students standing in line along with Alexis just to come and talk to us about a situation that's going on. And to give you an example how we got to dig deeper, I don't know if my internet is going in.
We can still hear you, John. Or now you're out. Yeah, you're like frozen.
Gloria. Gloria.
Just a second, Coach. I want to, yep, it looks like we lost.
Sorry about that, but just taking time just to build that relational piece.
You're back, okay. Yeah, no, that's great, thank you. Nadia, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to say that Memorial at my school, my teachers work hard to make relationships with Black and brown students, and they help them with if they're stuck or if they need support. And some of the Black students have white teachers, and the white teachers don't see fear in the Black, because the white teachers see like good in the Black students and brown students.
Thank you, Nadia. Anybody else want to add before we move on to Coach? I know, Coach, you have something, but I'll get to you. I just want to have others pipe in that we haven't heard from.
Can I say something quick?
Sure, Lori, go ahead.
I was just going to kind of circle back a little bit to something Anichi was talking about and Bianca was talking about in terms of accountability broader than youth accountability, because what we see quite often, what we hear from Alexis, who's a restorative justice coordinator in the schools, is students coming to her to talk with her about something that happened in a classroom, or they had been sent out of the classroom. Teacher is only wanting, sometimes when people want restorative justice, they want youth accountability, like we talked about before, and they're not looking at the impact of what happened in the classroom, that relationship between typically the white teacher and the Black student. And because of that, all that gets put on that student, and that student then doesn't feel safe, isn't heard, all of the things. And so I really want to sort of second and lift up what Bianca was talking about in terms of broader accountability within the school, because it's not, when we talk about do people have what they need in order to build relationships, and do people have what they need, and they don't, and we can't, it's harmful. So we need to have accountability all the way around for that kind of a thing. And then I also wanted to say quickly about the importance of spaces and the importance of places for kids to be able to go and connect.
You're breaking up, Lori. Maybe if you take your camera off.
And she'll have kids come in and say like all kinds of things, and just having a space to be able to talk and go through what they're dealing with is super helpful, and it actually de-escalates so many more situations just by being heard and feeling listened to, and having somebody to say, wow, that's, you know, I mean, that's all obvious, but also similar to what Coach Assad is saying, that needs to be supported. And if kids need that to be able to sit in a classroom, we have to prioritize that, because otherwise we're just waiting for something to happen.
Thank you, Lori. Anyone else want to, who has not?
I'd like to, I'll contribute. I would like to emphasize the idea of the thread between schools and families. And a lot of times I do wonder that even though teachers and staff know that communication with families goes such a long way to building the holistic relationship, that teachers often are really resistant to that work. Partly because it's logistics, partly because they don't feel comfortable talking to parents. Whatever it is, it just behooves me that it's not a priority throughout the school year. So that thread of the parent, teacher, staff relationship is crucial. The second thing I wanted to re-emphasize that was said here is the idea of, I have a strong investment in curriculum and instruction, and how students respond and can contribute to the co-planning, co-creating, co-teaching of curriculum in the classroom if teachers were brave and bold enough to allow that work to happen. So like, you know, just that sort of investment in curriculum design, just to me, like the strongest teachers have the strongest curriculum that involves the co-planning, co-development, co-creation with students. I feel like that's the second thing. The other thing that I wanted to emphasize is sort of like this ongoing professional, whatever, learning or you know, insight, whatever it is that teachers need to gain in order to inhibit or like, eradicate their biases against black and brown students. Like, it's almost like, I can witness this, and my own kids and my own students witness this because they tell me about it. But that they'll walk into the classroom and they feel this disdain from teachers about who they are just for being like black and brown in their classroom. And so that work of the unchecked biases, that teachers need to do, that they believe that there's this culture of pathology when kids walk into the classroom. Like, I cannot tell you how prevalent that is in classrooms with teachers. And then the other thing relates to curriculum and instruction, which is sort of like this ascription of intelligence to black and brown students that already, when black and brown students walk into the classroom, they've already been assigned a degree of intelligence. And that is also an area in which kids are picking up all the time. It's a theme that my own students and my own kids will tell me. So so those are areas. And then the last thing is sort of like, we talked about it a little bit here about trust. And I'm just flipping it to distrust, because I believe also that students walk into the classroom with already this assumption by teachers that they are, that there's some sort of criminality, like, attached or assigned to them. Thank you.
Can we talk about how sometimes parents are not good people to talk to, that sometimes parents are the problem, that sometimes they do have stuff going at home, some parents are abusive, some parents are not, good people to express that your child is having a problem, sometimes that their parents are the problem. And if your child doesn't want to go to school, then maybe it's something that's going on at school that makes them not want to go. If they feel uncomfortable in a space, they will not want to be there. If they feel as though they're alone, they will not want to be there. They'll find somewhere where they don't feel alone. That's why I feel like so many times that where I see a lot of group of students hang around each other, they even fail together, they don't grow together, is because all they know is nothing. They don't know anything because they don't have that. And they go in a space where they can relate to each other, and they just soak in this unworthiness that the teachers put out on them, that they feel unworthy. And they have to grab that worthiness back. And they have spaces to do that, or programs to do that, but it's only for certain groups of people. So it's just kind of like, it's hard for, like, especially teenagers. Some of us are going through depression. Some of us have anxiety. Some of us, it's hard to just be a good student, or what people say is a good student. I know a lot of people that do bad things that are really smart. And you be like, well, you're smart. Why are you doing the bad things? Maybe it's just because that's all they know. And I don't know how else to put it. Like, the school system is anti-black, anti-brown, all of those things. They set up us for failure. Half of us that graduate out of high school, especially the black men and brown men, they are in jail. They've been going to jail since middle school. I know my sister, one of her friends' brothers that are in middle school has went to jail in middle school. They're already criminalized since elementary school, since pre-K. They're easily are kicked out. They're easily dismissed by teachers, by people that are supposed to protect them. But they don't try to figure out why they're doing what they're doing. Why? They don't figure out the why. They just know what to do when it's there. Kick them out, leave them, because we have to focus on other children. And I know it's not a lot of teachers, and I know there's not a lot of help going around in school, but you have to understand that we, black and brown children, have been looked as criminals since elementary. I've experienced that. I see my brothers experience that. I seen a lot. It's hard. Like, my mother has always instilled school in me, that I should want to go to school and that I should be something. But it's hard trying to be something in a world where it's always someone against you, no matter who it is, no matter if it's the white students, the white teacher, the white principal, or anybody, because there's people that look like you that still look down upon you.
Inichi, thank you so much. I mean, this is exactly why we need the student voice here. So that was powerful. Thank you for your voice and lifting that up. Who just said Gloria?
This is Coach.
Oh, Coach, go ahead.
I wanted to address a couple of things that, we want everybody's tap dancing around. We're not addressing the fact that this is firmly domiciled in structural white supremacy, and we're not getting to it. We're using all these catchphrases and all these accommodative terms, and we just won't come out and say this is all based in racism. When these students say, as Nietzsche said, as the lady that spoke before her and all the great contributors to this meeting, when they talk about resolutional steps that we're still talking about after 10 years, why is there no resolution? Because whatever the power base is, which in this case has to be the Doyle building, the policies flow from the Doyle building down. Still, nothing is happening to support and uplift the children. At La Follette, by the way, I'll address that at the end. At La Follette, teachers can be blatantly racist because they know they aren't going to be held accountable. There are teachers at La Follette that kill Black and brown kids. There's a joke among Black and teachers that I won't have any Black kids in my honors class. When the Black kids ask for help, the teachers say, well, you know what you signed up for, don't ask me for any help. There's Black students that say to me, this teacher doesn't even know he's Black because he has all these pretty nicknames for white girls, but he won't even talk to the Black girls. We know this, we communicate this, yet this continues to happen. Somebody made the really great point that teachers assign Black kids, assign their level of intelligence. No, they assign their level of invisibility. They don't see you, and when you speak up, that's when you become a problem. That's the only time you're actually recognized. Even when we deal with special ed and IEPs, when we respond to white children with IEPs, we're immediately told before we take one step or two steps, they make the assumption you can't touch them, they have an IEP. First, they're making the assumption we're going to touch a child. Secondly, they tell us that because they're white, we can't touch them. It could be a 16-pound Black kid that just wanted a Kit Kat, pushing something off a table, and then everybody in outreach and security there immediately, like we're actually guarding President Obama. So it's firmly domiciled in the layers of racism that we don't address. And until we start addressing where this is allowed, we're just going to be here talking again. And I want to say this because when you love children and you work in the service of children, you have to be fearless in many cases. And somebody quoted Dr. King and talked about, and was a great quote, but let's not also forget about what Benjamin Banneker and Booker T. Washington said about people who look like the people who are mired in misery and how they profited from them. I've been at La Follette 2, maybe 3 years, and I've not seen anybody that works in outreach and engagement put a knee on somebody's back. Now, I want to say this, a lot of times when we're on the outside looking in, it's really easy to condemn, convict, and criticize. But if you're not in said building, we should be careful of the energy of what we say, because you are basically indicting the people that love children just as much as you do. And we have to make sure that the people who come there every day for the fidelity of these children and actually the teachers, we have to be very careful about what we say about people who care about children, because it's an incrimination of my soul for someone to assume that I would let anybody put a knee in a child's back. That's outreach and engagement. If we're identifying that with resource officers, they're not here anymore, and I'll let that discussion happen some other time. But as John Milton said, when I got there, I was an outlier because I spoke to the primarily white security staff at the time, and I said, we won't be trying to body slam Black girls. We won't be using racially accommodative terms. So I don't know what you guys are on, but we don't do that. We won't be doing that around me. So let's be very careful before we make these assumptions, because that really criminalizes us, and that's none of us as humans want to deal with somebody making assumptions about our integrity and the fact that so many of us have children. And when I'm in La Follette, when we are in La Follette,
Can you
students.
just close it up? Because I want to move on to the next.
Okay, but I will say this, Gloria. A lot of other people been talking and 3 and 4 times, and I want to make sure I get to say this pointed stuff to make us think, because these pretty dances have to stop. Let's just be careful about what we say about schools, that we don't walk in the hallways of.
Thank you, Coach.
Hey, Gloria, this is Bianca.
Okay,
I
Bianca.
just want to be clear and specify that this happened in 2018. The specific incident that I'm talking about, and it was Officer Johnson, and the parents are Freedom Inc.'s clients, and we've been working with them, and they filed several reports against the police department. So I want to be clear that I'm not talking about security or outreach engagement, but specifically Officer Johnson.
So be clear when you say it, because that's an insult to us.
Thank you, Bianca, for clarifying that. And so I think, do we have any other comments? Now, these are the type of conversations we're going to continue to have. I think that this is a really good really a good initial conversation. Moving, and we're going to use this information to feed into and support the work when we are reviewing policies. But we really have to get to now. We've spent significant amount of time talking about the issues, the challenges, what we talked about some of the elements, but now how do we put this into practice? What do we need to develop? What type of strategies to support the relationships building, the bias, the racism that exists within the system, and building trust between teachers and students and families, and providing those spaces of support and people of support within our schools. What does that actually look like? And those are the kind of conversations we will continue to have at our future meeting. Is there anything that we're missing from this initial conversation right now that we want to put into the space? Okay, great. Okay, so now we've had a great conversation. I think we spent an hour on this, which is great. So now we will move back into the presentation. The next slide, I will hand it over to Bryn, is it? Or who's covering this?
Yeah, and you pretty much covered it, but I can just do the transition. No, it was just simply to sort of provide a moment to think about this vision. And of course, that was the object, I imagine, of having such a large group and so many different roles, was to think about how does everybody's view of safety from the perspective of their role fit together into a unified vision of safety in our schools. And so sort of trying to just take a minute to reflect on what we heard from everyone and all of us, to try to think about how all those pieces fit together and can fit together into a unified vision of school safety, and to just transition us into looking at the policies now, and to reflect on how these policies can serve that bigger vision, so that we see these policies as useful and serving that vision. And now I'm going to hand it over to the other members of the administrative team to actually give some specific details about what's in existing policy to set up that reflection work that the committee is going to do for the next meeting. And I believe the first one goes to Karen.
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I truly enjoyed and appreciate everything that was shared today. And While the purpose of me sharing about the policy tonight is to get you thinking about what you heard, as Bryn talked about, and give some guidance to the board around perhaps some additional bits of clarity into these policies on what could be added. So the first one today that we'll share with you, and you'll reflect over the next 2 weeks about what are some additional things that you might recommend that would be stated in such policies. 4147 gives an overview about the expectations around employee and student safety. And it basically talks about the physical well-being of every student, visitor, employee will be the primary consideration of every school activity. So you heard this one last time that we presented, and it just gives a big umbrella about what that looks like in our schools and what's expected from all staff, all MMSD employees. What is their responsibility? So perhaps what we heard tonight might, you might be thinking about some of the things that you might want to add and recommend to change. I heard a couple of things that spoke to me around accountability measures and what you are expecting from staff when we're talking about student safety. Within the policy, some of the things right now that are in the policy for you to know is that was recently updated in February 25th, 2019, and it was to reflect the Act 143 requirements, and it's basically around kind of the technical things around school safety, around emergency procedures and drills, and what to make sure what schools have in place to respond to certain events. It also has an expectation about reporting accidents and injuries. That's important to know. It also has in there around when it is an emergency decision upon a school staff around contacting, 911, things about sending a child to a hospital, things like that. And when is it consult on behalf of a parent? So it kind of distinguishes those pieces. So look at that piece of the policy and think through that from a parent perspective and also from an employee. The other piece, it also, since February 2019, we did update it because it does require all school districts in the state of Wisconsin to every 3 years to have their school safety plans reviewed and on file with the Department of Justice. So those are some key highlights. And again, be thinking about it over the next 2 weeks about what are parts of it that you would want to review and revise to really reflect what safety means in MMSD and what's the accountability that you're looking for. Now I'm going to hand this over to Gina to speak about 4224.
All right, thank you. So Board of Education Policy 4224 is around reporting acts of school violence. And we talked a bit about this at the last meeting we were at because of what Karen said around Act 143, as well as what we've been attempting to create around being much more proactive when it comes to potential threats of school violence or other types of risk to students, staff, or to our buildings. So the district defines imminent threat as a situation, threat, or action that presents an immediate threat of harm, which could be reasonably expected to cause death or serious bodily injury. And you can go to the next slide, Karen. And then the Wisconsin State Statute 175.32 says that all schools in the state of Wisconsin are required to report acts of violence, report threats of violence or targeted threats towards schools, similar to the way that we do mandated reporting around threats or concerns around child abuse and neglect. And so we now ensure that we train staff on the fact that they're mandated reporters, and that they're mandated reporters both as far as the child protection Chapter 48 goes, and then as well as Act 143, the threats of school violence. But we also know that when it comes to threats, not all threats are equal, and we really need a team, a school-based team with a multidisciplinary approach and a background rooted in mental health and behavior support and connection to community agencies. And, we need to be thinking about, even if the student has made a threat, do they pose a threat? What else could be going on for the student? And so because of that, we have developed some training around threat assessment and critical response. All of our high schools have been trained, and we're going to be working on training our middle schools as well. And so this is an additional training on top of the mandated reporting training. And the idea behind this, again, is that prevention and early intervention, the desire that we are wanting to intervene early because our main focus is to divert youth away from the criminal justice system, that the idea is to really to assess the function of the behavior and evaluate what the underlying needs are. So again, evaluating early, providing support so that we're not having to necessarily deal with an imminent threat, and then developing next steps and a plan for support. Of course, this is, we want all staff, even if they are mandated reporters, we still want them to be consulting with a building principal, assistant principal, or another member of their threat assessment and critical response team before making a report, unless of course the report is imminent and it's an emergency situation. And we will have a lot more guidance around that information as we continue to work with you all and really just value your input so that we can do this as a community.
I'll take this one. This is policy 4400, investigation, interrogation, arrest, and search of students. Basically what this policy does is it provides a guideline to staff and administration as to number one, with certain situations when it's appropriate, we need to contact the police. Like we pointed out before, when there's threats of imminent harm or danger, we're pretty much mandated by law to contact police. So this kind of basically spells it out for the staff on what they should expect when they come across certain things in the schools that happen. And conversely, it also is a policy that our SROs were very well aware of when they were in the schools. We're continuing to teach with the removal of the SROs. We're continuing to work with Madison PD to make sure that the officers that are going into the schools understand it. So basically, what you're going to be looking at is the procedural stuff, and it covers investigating and conducting investigations in the schools by the police, with the police, and not only with the police, but with Child Protective Services and by administrators when they conduct investigations into incidents. Policy also covers arrest by police officers, how that is to take place within the schools, and the search of school buildings and school properties. And then the last component to that is the annual in-service training that's provided to all the APs and the officers, the SROs that took part of when they were in the schools. Okay, next slide, Karen. So the homework for next 2 weeks is going to be this. We'd like for you to review the policies that we've pointed out to you and come back with thoughts on how the policies can best serve the overall vision of school safety. In other words, take a look at these policies and really give them a deep cleansing, if you will. What do you see as working? What do you see as not working? What do you see as needs to stay? What do you see as need to be improved? And what's missing out of the policies? So basically, we wanted to give you a brief, high-level overview of what you're going to be looking at, because policies can be kind of confusing and they're kind of deep and stuff like that. Now we're going to circle back to the question part. As you review the policies and you come up with your questions, please email me the questions and we'll, again, add them to the living document and answer the questions, and get them back to everybody so everybody knows what questions are asked and what answers are provided.
Thank you. Thank you, team, for that. Now, I think just a couple things that pipe up in my own mind, and I think is the wanting to inform the team here what the crisis response team is and how they respond and what they do. I think that that may be something that the in a future meeting for the team to know. And I think that would help inform some of the policy decision making moving forward. And then also, I think something to consider, you know, the team here, when you're reviewing the policy, particularly what 4400 is, how do we, is it 4400? Yeah. So we had an established protocol and practice when we had SROs when responding to 4400, and that relationship that we've talked about today, it was really important, right? When SROs came in and they conducted these investigations based on 4400, oftentimes they knew the student, parents, families, and I just want to be thoughtful about how, without just an officer coming in who may not have that relationship with the student, and have an understanding of the history and the dynamics of the student, that really finding ways to replicate that, right? Because I think that is a missing, a big missing part that we will be missing when we have a day officer responding who does not know the dynamics and the relationship, doesn't have the relationship. And so just wanted to throw that out there for the team here to consider and start thinking about this particular policy 4400 and how we can implement strategies and ideas of supporting our students during these during the response. Any questions, concerns, Chief Ray? You're on mute.
Gloria, you articulated that very well, because that was a gap that I was seeing as that was the policy was being read, that relationship in. And I'll just comment on two things. One, and this may be something later on, but what is the Madison Police Department being asked to do in terms of that relationship in developing that? Because where you had the ERO, you had more of a focused kind of response, but now it could be anyone based upon how patrol services go. Secondarily, there's also a vertical, a vertical view to this. It's not just a police officer. You'll have a detective, and then also a prosecutor. All of this causes a ripple effect in terms of the relationship, in terms of who's responding to a school, what's expected. Because as I looked at 4400, some of those are more serious incidents. And generally there's a detective involved in that. And the attitude of a detective can impact an investigation as well. And in fact, it can impact it in more ways than what people may believe here, in terms of how a child is treated, how the investigation flows, what ends up happening, all of those things. So I'm really curious as to what is, you guys seem to be doing some great planning and focusing on this, but I'm really curious, what is the Madison Police Department doing in a parallel role with you on this?
Right.
Yeah, great point, Chief. I think that's going to be the practice, right? That is, you know, oftentimes we look at policy and we will review it, but doesn't necessarily match the practice. And we have to really be thoughtful about that and making sure that we have MPD on board and we are moving in the same direction on what we expect from them when they respond to these situations in our schools. Any others?
I don't think people feel comfortable with like police officers.
Hello.
Somebody's talking. Who's talking right now?
It's Wayne. Can you hear me?
Oh, Wayne, just a minute here. We have is it Ashiana?
No, Inichi.
Inichi. Oh, okay. Your name changed. Okay, Inichi.
I feel like a lot of students don't feel comfortable with police officers because even outside of school, they're not really good at their job or do what they're supposed to do. Like, they're supposed to protect us, but do they really protect us? And it's like you keep saying relationships, and it shouldn't have to be a relationship between one person. It should be actually being a decent human being and know how to treat another decent human being upon meeting them for the first time. It's like it shouldn't have to be a relationship. It should just be respect. And that's what some people get misconstrued. Like, I feel like police officers feel like the citizens should respect them, but do they really respect the citizen?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I feel like when they write reports, is it really a report because it's something serious, or is it their bias making it serious? Is it their mindset making it serious? It's just like a lot of teachers, like especially teachers of non-color, it's just like they're really sensitive to certain things, and that, I don't know, like they will cry. This like one time during school, me and a couple of students were African American and we're laughing in class or whatever, and one of them says the N-word, which I feel like, okay, you Black, you can say it, okay, and that's my opinion. And I know a lot of Black people that say it's not okay, but the white teacher said, but if I say it, I'll be wrong. And then we had got into an argument or a debate, and then one of the students started yelling because she felt offended, and the teacher started crying, and we got in trouble. Not only did we get in trouble, we got into in-school suspension, which also is getting reported. Was it that serious? No. But we still, and though from them, we still got in trouble. Not because of the teacher saying what she said was the root cause of what happened, but how we reacted. And it's just like the student has to like change or reword how they feel differently to make someone else comfortable. And it's like Black people have to keep making people comfortable instead of like them just being comfortable. You can't erase someone's bias mindset. You can't erase racism. You can't make someone stop being racist. A racist cannot be like, I'm going to stop being racist today. They can't do that. They have to unlearn and be taught, or they have to understand that this is not how you should be or how you should think, because it's not okay. Because in reality, it's not affecting them. It's affecting the people that they're criminalizing, basically. And it's just like, we don't want you to baby the students, and we want everybody to take accountability. But it's like, when a white person starts crying, we get in trouble. Or if a white person feels attacked, we're in trouble. If a white person says something about a Black person, they will be believed. It's their word against ours, basically.
Great, thank you. Wayne?
Yeah. I'm
Uh,
sorry, Gloria, I just wanted to let you know, yes, we have a new addition to the meeting. Ajiana Alexander is present.
Okay, thank you. Wayne, and then we'll move on to the next agenda item. Oh, we can't hear you, Wayne.
Just a quick question. What's that? Is that better?
Yep, if you can,
Yeah, you might have to take your earphones out.
How's that? Is that good?
a little, yep.
Okay, so Gloria, I just want to ask, what's the current response for officers?
Tell the brother we can't hear him.
Coach, we can hear him. I can hear him.
Gloria, so what's the response now for officers who come to schools where we don't have SROs in terms of their response and how they conduct their investigations? What is that like now?
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, good question, Wayne. And also Chief Ray, your question was also excellent. MPD and the school district are very cognizant that the SROs have been pulled out of the schools. We understand that there's going to be some concern that the SROs are going to get pulled out and things are going to change. We're constantly working with MPD. In fact, we meet with them every other week to go over pre-planning and stuff like that. The command staff is very aware of policy 4400. In fact, we have a meeting with the command staff next week to review 4400. So we're making sure that we're all on the same page. One of the big things that I stress and that Karen stresses is training, getting out in front of the officers, especially now that we have a department full of newer officers, getting out in front of them and getting them accustomed to policy 4400, and not just a policy, but just the nuances of, we're dealing with kids. And I think somebody said it before earlier, we're dealing with kids, and we have to remember that we're dealing with kids. We're not dealing with adults, we're dealing with kids, and their minds are actively growing. And there's some struggles that kids have that we all had as kids too. So we have to get in with the PD as we've been doing, and working with them to get the training in so they understand where we're coming from. But on the flip side of that too, we also have to work with our staff so that they understand where the police department is coming from. There's certain policies that the police department has that aren't our policies, that don't mirror our policy on some things. So we have to get on the same page, and it's a constant work. Like I said, MP is very, very well aware of it, and is actively working with the school district so we can have consistency across the board, and we can all learn and grow from each other.
Great, thank you, Mark.
I have a question. So what is the accountability process if a police officer, SRO or not, harms a child? What does the accountability look like? How can MMSD hold MPD in the city of Madison accountable?
Well, I mean, I can't say that we had accountability through the contract. Since we don't have a contract now, I think that we're going to have to incorporate that in another. I mean, it's a great question, Bianca. I mean, we had, now that we don't have a contract and MPD, will come in our schools, and if something happens, we're going to have to figure out a different way to add accountability to their presence. Obviously, they are upheld to high standards in actions, but in their response. But as we've seen across the country and here locally, things happen, and we're going to have to figure out from our relationship with MPD, on what the expectations are from our end and what that relationship looks like. Karen, you have something?
Question, Bianca. When I started my work as a principal, and Mike Hernandez can relate to this as well, and Devon, every year we receive 4,400 training. Not only do principals receive it, but also principal designees, and anyone that is, Patrice has received it as well. And that puts the expectation that the school administration is there working alongside to ensure that the police department is following the expectations of access to our students. So with that, we also have had, and I remember when I first started with Luis Udice, for all of those that are familiar with Luis, he trained us to ensure that we were consulting with him as a school safety coordinator to make sure that he was giving us guidance. And he always said, there are times that there are emergencies, but not everything is an emergency. So pause and call. There is, and he said, get me on the phone so I can talk and be the liaison with the police department. We've also had over the years a good connection with the district captains. So if there was any sort of way that, not just in the high schools, but more in the elementary and middle schools, because we didn't have SROs, if we felt that any police officer did not handle the situation with respect, Luis expected us to connect with him and also the captains to make sure that there is guidance and accountability on that. So I just want to, 4,400 with SROs or not, there is an expectation for school administrators to follow and be that guide to make sure that the rights of our students and families are protected. So, so certainly an ongoing conversation, and we do have next week a good conversation coming up with the area captains to make sure that we're doing their training as well of how to work with us in MMSD. So thanks for the question. I just wanted to clarify that. And I thought it was a great question, Bianca.
Yeah, so just a follow-up question. Even when the contract was in place, there were still officers called to the school who were not the assigned SROs. And also, there have been several incidents that were reported. People have filed complaints against MMSD and the Madison Police Department. And from the outside looking in, from the community's perspective, who everyone is supposed to be accountable to, there was actually no accountability. When I'm most familiar with Officer Johnson, because that's where a lot of my clients went to file it, but there was actually no accountability from the outside looking in when he harmed students and parents. So I think the accountability needs to be outward facing and made accessible to the public when harm happens and when the accountability happens, because to us, it sounds like there's either no accountability or there's a conversation. And that's, like you said, Gloria, that's reflective of what's going on in the nation. Like they're not just incidents, people are literally dying, and police just get a slap on the wrist or get paid suspension and come back and get to kill more, which is what happened with Officer Matt Kinney, right? He murdered somebody and was allowed to return to work and murdered another child. So I think the accountability needs to be made explicit, and also again, outward facing and accessible to community, not just happening behind closed doors, if it's happening at all.
I agree with Bianca.
Thank you. Just a second. Thank you, Bianca. I think Chief Noble Ray had his hand up, and then is it Ashiana? Gianna. Okay, then we'll go after you. You'll go after Chief Ray.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. The accountability factors that have been built in for years are the traditional ones, but I think it would be helpful in terms of the outward facing. There's been a lot of change that has taken place. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, the City Council passed the citizens oversight, which allows for an auditor, an additional monitor, citizens oversight, where you have a monitor that would review those investigations. I think it would be helpful to get that information out in terms of forward facing. I thought the comments about reaching out to the district captains was an excellent one, and keeping those connections going. But I think it would be really helpful, because there's a lot that has changed. You had a report that was done with 177 recommendations focused on the issue of accountability. that is just starting to be implemented. And I think listening to that, I think it would be important to make sure that the community and the school is educated to some of these new accountability measures that are being implemented.
Great, thank you. Okay, next, Asiana.
Asiana.
I
just feel like for the accountability, it really needs to be like more serious, and like the community really needs to know about what's going on, because for one, our safety matters. For the Black and brown youth, our safety matters, and I feel like if something were to happen with the police and you guys don't have nothing figured out, like how are we supposed to, go about anything if you guys don't have no type of plans or ideas on how you guys are going to go about if something does happen to a student with the officers and they can't do nothing about it because you guys have not took time to really go deep into it.
Yeah, thank you for that. This is a great conversation. I'm glad that it was elevated and brought into the space. As Noble Ray said, I think, the city has made some decisions and movement forward. And I think it is an opportunity for this team to come up and with, what it looks like and how can we support that work. And so this is really an opportunity for us. And Savion, I'm going to have to log off. Sorry. Can you take over the last slide and close?
Wait a minute, Savion. I have a question as well to add to this.
No worries. Go ahead.
Bye,
goodbye. Thank you, Gloria. Let's not forget about the accountability of the neighboring police departments like Monona and McFarland. What type of strategy are we developing for accountability with those communities that have small pockets of Black students in them and won't be coming into the school with an engaging type of a policy when they come to deal with Black kids? The Great Gray, we know where that is. We know we're in the middle of the Monona village. We understand that there have been some traditional shortcomings with how they relate to children of color. So as we develop these policies, hopefully with the Madison police, is there anybody trying to create some type of groundwork of outreach and communication and accountability with these other departments that don't have a track record at all of really respecting or even acknowledging Black and brown children?
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Coach, because that is one thing that had been lacking is the communication with the neighboring agencies. And that came to my attention when I started, especially with the school that's in Shorewood. So if an incident happens, that's an immediate, something that calls for immediate police action, I guess, or a police response, they're probably going to be the first ones there. So yeah, we do want to make sure, and we are going to be working with them to make sure we're all on the same page.
It's critical, sir, because last year Monona cops would walk into they walked into La Pala and they tried to body slam a kid, and we just told him you cannot do that here. And actually a principal and outreach said, we can sit this kid down in this room, but we're not going to let you come in here and treat this kid like he's an object and like he's not human. We'll get in trouble before we allow you to invalidate this kid's humanity. So that happens a lot, and it's imperative that we develop a really a true strategy and true accountability, actual accountability, because we all have to understand that we jettisoned police officers out of the building. Let's not be delusional in thinking that when they come in, they're going to be happy campers.
Yeah, that's a good point, Coach, and I'll add Dane County Sheriff's Department as well. Martha, did you have any questions or comments?
Just a clarifying question. From everything that I've heard,
I'm sorry, you're going in and out real quick. A little choppy there. Shoot. Hey, Martha, if you can still hear me, can you email me or message me your comment or your clarifying question?
I'm wondering if there's data that we can see in terms of. She back?
I'm sorry, Lori, go ahead.
I'm wondering if there's data that we can see in terms of how many investigations happened in the last couple of years. Who called? Was it the school calling cops in, or was it the police coming into the schools? Just to get us, and like, what was it for? Just to get a sense of what it is. And so also to see if we can build some strategies around preventing that from having to happen in the first place. So we're not calling the police, the schools aren't. And I'm also wondering, is there like a point person that decision gets run through in the schools, or is just anyone calling the police in the schools?
I think, we do have general data on arrests. I'm not sure if it's disaggregated into what arrests or citations led to investigations. Karen or Mark, do you have any thoughts on that?
And Lori, are you thinking overall in all the schools? Because there's a little bit more of just when they call police or 911 is called to a school.
I'm curious about any data that you have associated with police being called or to the high school, so we can have a better understanding of how many incidents are you talking about in terms of police coming into the schools, and what's it for?
Yeah, we'll follow up with it. We'll get something out on what we have. And then the follow-up is, again, our schools work with school administration to make that determination. Obviously, it's a consult before one is called. Most of our schools do that because they want to make sure that they're responding appropriately. So our school administrators have worked really hard to make sure that their staff feel comfortable consulting. As you know, like the mandatory reporting, any staff member can call police and report something. We have not had that where we had staff calling. They have had where it was in consult with school administration. So as you our worry was when the act came in, that there would be many staff calling on to report a school incident, and that wasn't the case. So that's good news, because it means that staff were consulting with administration before, and it wasn't an increase of police calls to the schools. So that's good. So we'll work on some patterns and trends to share at the next meeting. We can follow up with you guys.
Okay, and then Eugenia, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, I do, but my daughter started talking to me, so she's like,
Oh, I'm sorry. No worries.
Maybe I'll come back after the next person, because it's gonna be easier to like give her what she needs right now.
All right. We will wait for Eugenia to come back. Otherwise, anyone else with questions or comments?
Something about police officers in elementary and middle schools don't sit right with me, because why do you need police officers for little children that are literally children? And like, it's not like it's getting called because on all kids, it's really mostly being targeted on Black and brown kids, and that's what I have learned, and that's not okay, because you're giving them a criminal record starting out before they even like experience life yet. Or kids act out all the time, and that's the truth. They throw tantrums, they do a lot of stuff, they throw things. So I don't think that the police should be called because of that, and you're putting them in harm's way, because in reality the police, they won't get in trouble, because there's laws in place where they can't get in trouble. No matter what they do, they can hurt a child and they won't get in trouble. A sorry won't fix it. My apologies, my bad, that's not going to change anything, because what has happened and it cannot be undone. So it's just like, it's not okay and it's not safe for children, teenagers to be, especially Black and brown kids, to be around police officers because they attack them and it's police brutality, and that's what they're gonna face.
And I agree with you. Like, another thing for me is, like, school is supposed to be a place where kids go to be safe. Like, they're not supposed to have the image in their head, let me act like this because the police around me and I don't want them to, like, I don't know. Kids are supposed to be comfortable in school. They're not supposed to have second thoughts about being safe and how they should act in school. When school is supposed to be somewhere where you can be yourself. How am I supposed to be myself in a school where I feel like if I do one thing wrong, the police gonna look at me and then they're gonna start thinking, this kid's that, this kid's bad, so let me pay attention to them. And then another thing, like elementary students, they're still learning. Like even high school students, they're still learning too. But why would a little kid need a police officer in school with them? Like, that doesn't even make sense. Why would a police officer need to tell a kid to wake up for nap time or get off the floor, pick up your pencil? Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm ready to jump in.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think what I wanted to say is that when reviewing, like looking at the policies and listening to the conversation and everything that we have been talking about, how our conversation has always come back to system accountability, to police accountability, to institutional racism, to all these things that are happening, we have to start talking about more what in transformative justice framework would be societal safety, that it's about systems built in equitable power relationships, mutual accountability and strong alliances. There is no way that we're gonna be like building safety if we don't look at it like from a holistic point of view. We're just basically like the policies that we are kind of like reviewing are not really addressing the whole system in place. And are there really going to be resources and our voice is really going to be taken into consideration, or what people are talking about, to invest in communities of color, to invest in the Black community, to invest in Black staff? Is that really, that's really what the conversation is going into. And what are the resources that are there? Where are we talking? How much money are we talking about? How is this funding going to be, like distributed? Yeah, so that's basically, if not, we're just really talking about a Band-Aid, really like from the MMSD institution. Is this really like a Band-Aid? Like, what are we going to be doing instead of police officers? Or is this really how we're going to be creating a culture of safety, of freedom, and of dignity for other students, especially for Black students whose dignity has been attacked for so many years? And there has to come with resources as well to invest into the Black community, to invest into Black-led community organizations and all that. If not, this is just going to be a Band-Aid and we're not going to be moving in the right direction. So yeah, so before this one starts talking, I'm going to mute myself.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really important that the board put their money where their mouth is in terms of funding these resources that the group comes up with their recommendation. I believe I saw someone else's hand raised. Was it Corvan? Oh, he's no longer here. Coach, did you have another thing to say?
Yeah, real quick, I do have another thing to say. The woman that just spoke, it was brilliant and urgent, and it gets to the crux of everything we're talking about, because, when I use the term performative, we could talk all day and articulate incredibly well and bedazzle people with our ability to elocute. But the bottom line is, where's this money coming from, and what's going to happen? What are we going to do with the funding, and if we're going to do it correctly? Because I referenced, I think it was Benjamin Banneker, when he talked about people in the business of misery mining misery on the backs of those suffering, mining millions on the backs of misery. I'm just letting everybody know that this is a business of so many people, the devastation of Black and brown communities for centuries. I'll say 500 years, because we know this isn't the only America where slavery was. So we have people a lot of people seeking kids to, they appeal to their sense of desolation and isolation, and they use these children, and these children aren't graduating, they're not changing their life, but these people continue to make money off these children. The school system, other people, outside service providers, we know the real ones. I personally, I don't need to name names, but I'm very impressed by the queens that are in this battle, the super strong, incredible women that are leading this thing, because it's a shame that it always has to be women leading it. That should say something to us Black men, but I want to give respect to the women of every color who are out here speaking up for these children of color. But I will say, let's be very careful about just using Black children for your own means. Then once you get your coffers filled, you discard these children, because if you're not in it sustainably and for the long run, don't tell me you care about changing children's narratives. Where is the money coming from, and are we being honest about it? Because we have all these people, talking about what they're going to do, Article 6, Article 7, and nobody, at the end of it all, people are going to say, well, due to this, due to our lack of funding, we can't do this. It all boils down to adequate money and where we're going to put money at, and are we going to listen to the voices inside the building instead of embracing every bright, shiny penny? If we're not respecting children, then we're going to be talking about this for the next 100 years.
I agree. Thank you. Anyone else before we go on to the next proposed meeting dates and agendas?
I was gonna say something about like what we could do for schools and stuff. I was gonna throw in some couple things because we're talking about like the community. I was gonna say, like, what are we finna do about like counselors? Because I feel like counselors are like something that is a big thing for kids now, especially in high school. I feel like I really want to get into it. Like, there's so many things that I want to say about counselors, because I feel like counselors are supposed to be like a safe place, a safe space. And I know like the thing is there's a safe space in schools, but I feel like there's so many like rules that should be changed for a lot of kids, because I feel like there's no way for them to actually open up to a counselor when there's still police involved in certain things. Like, I don't know, it's just a lot that I want to say about the community and counselors, and a lot of things in school I feel need to be changed. And yeah, I don't know if this is like the right time to really get into it about it though.
No worries. You will have the next meeting to voice your observations as well, and recommendations. I will say, human behavior, especially the behavior of young people, does not happen in a vacuum, and it's often influenced by mental health and generational trauma and childhood trauma or lack thereof. And we need to start taking a mental health approach instead of a punitive and punishment approach, as a society across all sectors, but especially in our education system. All right, anybody else? So, Barb, I think we're ready to go on to the confirm the next meeting meeting dates, times, and proposed agenda items. I'm looking at the agenda, and I see that we have September 24th, 2 weeks from now, and let's see here.
October 8th.
October 8th, 2020, same time. I think from the conversation, we can glean up. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Savian, the last slide in the PowerPoint talks about a proposed agenda for September 24.
Yep. Does anyone want to throw proposed agenda items for that meeting on the table 2 weeks from now, based on the conversation that we had here today?
During the last meeting, we talked about the YWCA and Time Bank doing an in-depth training or workshop or presentation on restorative justice, but I can't remember if we talked about that being this week or there wasn't an official date proposed.
I think I think folks said that they weren't fully available to do that. Lori or Eugenia, do you have any perspective?
For this meeting, yeah, we weren't able to, we had people that were out of the office and things like that, so we didn't have enough time to put it together for this meeting, and Vanessa's gone, and
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Lori.
Yeah. But did we agree that on the next one we were gonna be doing it, or the
I think
following?
we tentatively agreed. Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think we should look at October 8th for that?
Lori, how do you feel?
How do you feel?
I think well, October 8th, and the next one is what, September what? Sorry.
September
24th.
The 24th. I'm just like looking at the dates of the summit, the Racial Justice Summit, because that, I think that's the next week. Hold on, let me just make sure that it's the next week. Espérame, por favor, mamita. Yeah, it's the next week. I'm okay. Lori, how are you about the next one?
The 24th?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how much time should we plan for? What should we plan for?
I think you can maybe plan for a 20 or 30 minute.
Ooh, that's very little time.
Okay. Well, we could do an hour. I mean, we could make it the whole meeting if you find appropriate between presentation and question comment period.
Yeah, I personally would like it to have more time, also to have like more to make it more interactive and to bring more stories into that. I know that a lot of people here would like to bring their voices, and that I don't think it should be just like a, you know, a one way, but like more like a dialogue, and maybe exploring also some of the principles of restorative and transformative justice, because we're really looking at like a deeper system transformation, and that would be better if we engage in more dialogue. Like that includes also conversation about safety and about what is accountability, about what is it that, you know, were we restoring and all those things. So I think it would be a good idea to have more time.
Hey,
or if we have an hour, then to that the possibility of like continuing maybe that dialogue the next which it would be always better because it's all going to be connected. So
yeah. Bren?
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to ask if it would make sense to have, since restorative justice is work that's being done by many in this community, you know, also in the schools, and we have restorative justice leads at MMSD, would it make more sense to have a joint presentation to talk collectively about what restorative justice looks like in our community? If we're approaching this as a community, right? How does it all fit together? Would it make sense to have MMSD folks and Time Bank and the Y together present what restorative justice looks like?
Jump in, Lori, whatever you think. I just want to mention that the last time that we presented as a collective together, that was the YWCA Time Bank and the MMSD Restorative Justice team, we actually presented and recommended for SROs to transition out of the high schools. And the MMSD internal team got a lot of backlash from the institution because of them joining their voices with our recommendation, which is like from a restorative justice perspective, that what it should be recommended. So, you know, we need to like also put that into there. So are they really free to talk or not? Because they thought they were, but they were not. You know, at the end, the institution who does like the leads of restorative justice recommended to the other committee what they didn't want to hear or what other people didn't want to hear. So is it really, you know, is the institution in that place or not, you know?
Well, I'm here to help change the institution. So hopefully we won't have to worry about that this time.
Yeah. I'm not sure if they're gonna also have time to join, but like we can connect and talk more about that possibility. It's not that we don't want, you know, them to be excluded, but I think it allows, you know, for when community partnerships allows to push for the institution for accountability. Whether like when there's staff inside, there is the struggle of that, of their jobs, right? To push for system accountability. So that's also what we talked last time. Brent, I don't know, were you here last time? Because we kind of like touch on that. Vanessa also talked about it and everything. So is there a specific need that you specifically have about bringing their voices or something like that?
I think the biggest part is simply trying to think about, you know, this is such a moment when we have all these roles together to think about how we as a community move safety forward in a true and meaningful way. And it feels like part of safety is creating that trusting community among all of us, every member of this community. So that
why are they not in this committee?
I did not appoint the administrative members, but they are part of, I'm in their department. And so that's also, you know, I work closely with our RJ leads. And that's also why I wanted to bring that into this space, that, you know, these are all amazing people. You're all amazing people doing restorative justice work. And wouldn't it be great if we could have a shared vision?
Then we need to check in with them to see if they have the time to get together with us to prep something for next couple of weeks.
I think I can pretty safely say the time would not be an issue, and that they would be fully on board.
So let me just ask a question. A certain amount of people are going to teach entire schools what restorative justice is. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah. I think it'd be a combination of specific school staff, community partners, and district administration.
So the practical application of this, who's going to be in charge of that? Because I mean, as much as we want to teach it, the practical application of it will come down to the people actually in the school, right?
Yep.
So do we have a diverse group of people from said schools actually on these teams?
On this committee or on our restorative justice team at administration?
Both questions.
Yes, we have our high schools represented on the committee, and yes, we have our four high school or our high schools represented on the administration team.
So we have some outreach and engagement from the pilot on it. Is that what are we saying we have that?
I'm sorry, ask that again.
Are we, thank you, sir. Do we have outreach and engagement from the pilot? Are they on any of these teams and committees that are responsible for the practical application of the social justice? I mean, it's restorative justice, I'm sorry.
Mark or Brent, can you take that?
I'm not positive if I understand the question. I was suggesting that, you know, our RJ, that we have two, obviously, people who are restorative justice leads at the district level, and then they connect with and support schools, and that I would trust them, you know, and Timebake and the Y to collectively present on restorative justice.
Yeah,
and to
I also
bring
want to say
in
that
school voice as well.
Yeah, right now we're a little bit straying from the question, which is trying to set the agenda for the next meeting. If any folks have topics, if there are questions that you'd like answered, you can send them to Mark, and then we can address those at the next meeting or via email and the tracker as well. Yeah. But as far as agenda items for the next meeting, that's what we're trying to do right now.
Yeah, but also in Time Bank and YWCA, we have staff who are restorative justice coordinators who work like in the schools as restorative justice coordinators, implementing restorative justice practices and responding with a restorative justice lens. Maybe that was the question, Coach, that you were asking, whether it's more like from a intellectual understanding, not that much of like a practice, like of being there on the ground doing that. So our teams have people who are assigned to schools.
I do welcome you to send those questions to Mark, and we can add them to the question hopper.
Okay, all I'm saying is this, because I do want to express this, because everybody told me what my question was. I'm telling you what my question is. The practical application, no matter what it is in philosophy and theory, the practical application requires that people in the building who are there 8 hours a day, every day, should be the first ones getting this type of training, because no matter what somebody says when they can teach something an hour a week and then they're not in the building, the people who actually have the fidelity of the school every day should be ground floor people being taught honestly, because the more you dilute restorative justice, the weaker it's going to be when it's time for it to actually be something working. The efficacy of it, it gets more diluted when it has to be taught to somebody that should be the first one learning it, if that is clear enough for everybody.
Yep. Right now we are straying from the legal notice, so we can address these questions at the next meeting and concerns. And I totally hear you, Coach, about folks who are doing the actual work need to be grounded in this the most. The thing about this committee is that, yeah. So Eugenia, Lori, Bryn, would y'all like to huddle up maybe offline and see if we could coordinate a presentation on restorative justice to get your concerns addressed? Cool. All right. And so does anyone else have any recommended items for the next agenda? All right, having that, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. I need a second.
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 Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thank everybody for participating. I will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Have a good one.